Hello, this is Daniel Doci sharing with you my final presentation on social psychology. Thank you for your time and interest. My topic of interest is stereotype threats for women in the STEM field, which stands for science, technology, engineering, and math. I will be sharing my perspective on this social psychology theme as well as how it relates to my personal experiences, or better, say the experiences of those very close and dear to me. Before sharing the reasons behind my interest on this theme, let us first briefly review what stereotypes and stereotype threats are. Stereotypes are beliefs or ideas about a group of people that are often fixed and overgeneralized, but they are also a type of prejudice as people tend to assign the perceived characteristics of the group to the individual and thus ignoring the elements that define each one of us as individuals. The image on the right depicts an example of stereotyping women's responsibilities at home and men's as a provider and business person. Now let's look at a few other examples of negative stereotypes, and then see how they lead to stereotype threats. All stereotypes such as girls are bad at math, boys aren't creative, and the other examples you see in this image can cause a psychological self-threat for the members of the social group. This causes the stereotype threat. By the way, stereotypes can also be positive, in which case they convey a favorable belief for the social group in question. But my focus is negative stereotypes since they are the cause for the stereotype threat. Spencer defines the stereotype threat as a self-confirming apprehension that one can be evaluated based on a negative stereotype. The image here shows how Steele modeled the stereotype threat based on his experimental research findings. Basically, the existence of the stereotype, race in this case, in conjunction with the psychological threat that their ability in the experiment was under scrutiny, interfered with their performance. I would like to now delve into the stereotype threat for women in STEM, explain this threat and research findings, and then recommend what we can do to reduce or eliminate the impact of the stereotype threat. So remember the earlier stereotype threat about girls not being good in math? There is a very similar stereotype threat about women not being as good as men in the STEM fields, and it carries with it the stereotype threat that impacts or could impact women's performance in STEM. Let me pause for a moment and explain why this theme in social psychology is of special interest to me. Well, it hits close to home. My mother was always very talented in the exact sciences, and she studied computer science for her undergraduate, master's, and PhD. Yet, after 3 years in the field, she switched careers due to what she described as negative stereotyping and isolation. What does the research tell us? The research does show that negative stereotypes and stereotype threats are causing decreases in mathematical performance and learning for women. Therefore, it is important to find solutions to the problem, and at the conclusion of this presentation, I provide 2 recommendations to address the problem. Before going into the recommendation, let's further elaborate on some research findings. Spencer's research found that women performed equally to men with their math scores when they were told that there were no differences in gender. However, when they were told that there was a gender difference, the women dramatically confirmed the stereotype due to the stereotype threat. Logel also conducted experimental research on this topic. The chart indicates that actually women perform much better in math than in English in the part of the experiment with no sexist cues. The reverse was true during the part of the experiment with sexist cues, where they performed much better in English, thus confirming the stereotype. Logel also found that in a domain like math, in which women are negatively stereotyped, interacting with a sexist man can trigger social identity threat and undermine the woman's performance. As per Riddle and others, negative stereotypes impact not just the woman's performance in math, but also their learning. To elaborate further, the study also found out that women under the stereotype threat had difficulty with encoding math-related info in their memory. had reduced ability to learn abstract math rules, and ultimately showed poorer math performance. Riddle and his team found that even perceptual learning is negatively impacted by the gender stereotype threat. So when a girl struggles to learn a simple algebra problem due to such threat, this may impact her negatively when switching to geometry or trigonometry. This reduced learning would hamper their efforts or desires to enter into careers in sciences and math. In conclusion, the gender stereotype threat is a serious problem, particularly in the STEM field, because it is causing damage to women's performance and learning. To tackle such serious problems, my recommendations are that organizations and educational institutions create environments that reduce the impact of such stereotypes threat during the acquisition of math skills by women. And one of the best ways to do that is to eliminate all cues or indirect or unintentional hints at the stereotype. My recommendation also includes efforts and programs to facilitate the learning of relevant skills by women that enables and encourages them to enter into careers in science and mathematics. Thank you for your time, and I hope you learned something about stereotype threats in the STEM field and what we can do to minimize them.